Hi, and welcome to my live painting demo. I'm here in my very cold mudroom tonight because our furnace is out. We've just negotiated a deal to get a new furnace, but that won't be for another couple of weeks probably. So, a lot of down jackets in the house and little space heaters. Anyway, I don't think that'll affect my oil painting much, but welcome. And tonight I will be doing a painting of a young woman named Tamara. It's part of a dual portrait, and so her this portrait commissioned aligned with the timing of the live demo. So I am just going to get a start of this painting as part of that live demo. I'm not sure how it'll go in relationship to just a it's just a painting that I'm doing as a demonstration sketch because I want to be mindful of getting the likeness right and making sure that I am getting the placement right on the panel. She is in France, so I'm using metric sizes so that the panel that I send her is easily frameable in standard sizes, and and that will be matched with another painting that she's commissioned, which will be the same size. And that one I may end up doing next week, but I'll have to see. I may get that one started beforehand. So anyway, so I'm going to get on my way. Please tell me where you're tuning in from. I'm happy to see where in the world people are. I know in the United States, a lot of people are traveling or starting their travel plans for Thanksgiving, so there may be less people tuning in. I see a coworker of mine, Angela, is here saying hey, and I'm happy when she tunes in so she can tell me how I did the next day. So she's actually out this week. She'll have to tell me how I did on Monday. So I am going to switch this around. Pardon my fingers there. And so this is the photo. If I zoom out, then you can see. I'll zoom out here. That's not the zoom out. There it is. So this is the total photo here that I have to work with. Let me get rid of my centimeters. And so that is the composition. I tilted it a little bit from what she first had sent me because it's a dual portrait. The couple will be looking at each other, and so her with the way she is in the initial, you can see I've rotated this a bit. Um, Let me see if I can unrotate it. No, it's fine, but you get the idea that she was looking up a little bit too much. So with that said, I will. Oh, that's not it. Size reference. There we go. That one. Okay. So you see, we have 7 people now. I'm going to go ahead and get started on the painting. And again, I spend a fair amount of time with the with measuring, making sure I have everything set on the panel the way I want, and I do set up my reference and the computer monitor the exact same size as the panel that I'm painting on, and that's just the way that I have been working, and it's been working out pretty well. So I am not have no reason to change that, especially since I am working from photographs. I do would like to get this propped up a little bit higher. Let me see if I have. I do have the Joy of Cooking. Oh no, it's the Good Housekeeping Cookbook. I think it's from the 1960s. Let me see if it has a date in it. But I got this for free um, at a library when I lived in New York for their $1 book sale. But now it has become a nice little prop for getting my panels my monitor the right height. Yep, that looks pretty good. Okay, that's exactly where I want it. So I am going to pick out a good brush for just sketching in the paint. Here's a nice round that has a little bit of length to it, and so it's going to give me a little bit of a line with some thickness. I'm just going to get a little bit of a gray tone here. So I am just going to start to sketch in a little bit where I see, and then I can go maybe measure and do a little correction as I go. Just trying to get a little bit of a feel of the gesture. Her head is tilted back, so we don't actually see so much of the back of her head. It's more implied back here. But if I was thinking about like where her skull, the the back point of where her skull meets the top of her vertebrae, it's going to be right about there, and then her chin coming down. So I've realized I have to start thinking a little more structurally about the anatomy and sort of where things are. So if I think about her face, the base of the nose, the line of her eyes, her eyebrow, that part of the forehead, and maybe getting a little bit too far ahead of myself without doing any measuring, because I usually find that I'm pretty far off if I just eyeball everything in. But you do get a sense of the idea of where her face is if I start putting in these sort of indications of anatomy. And then her skull is actually going to be up higher like that. Okay, so let's do a little bit measuring where we go. Randy is in, that's right, you were in Washington State. Last time I thought you were in Washington, D.C. Um, and in Arlington, Washington. I think that's why I was getting confused. So let's do a little bit of measuring. So from the outer part of her eye to the edge is going to be right there. So far, so good. Maybe my eyeballing isn't so bad until I get to here, probably it's going to be. So, right where the eye and the nose intersect from the top, still, that's still pretty good. The nose breaks the line of the face a little bit. Get the tip of the nose here. So far, so good. Okay, so that's the tip of her nose. And I didn't quite have quite as slanted. But if I think about the base of her nose kind of being a triangle, we have sort of this shape, and then we see the one nostril. And I'm just going to actually put in just a little bit of dark paint to kind of help me out here. Okay. And then the little bit of the side of her nostril, I can go and kind of get an idea. Now, I started color coding a little bit here, but I can um, paint over those colors as I get a little bit further in. And then we have her eye. So you can see actually, even though I eyeballed it, I wasn't really that as far off as I usually am. I'm measuring to her tear duct. Yep, I looks like I'm pretty spot on there. Put in a little bit of an indication. And Jennifer's here watching from Canada. Maybe it's a little bit colder there than it is in my house. Again, for those who are just coming in, I've lost heat in my house, so I'm painting in the cold. But right now it's only about 50. It's about 55 in the house, so it's not so bad. We've been using space heaters, um, and it was just a touch warmer today than it had been. Um, well, yesterday wasn't too bad, but the couple days before that, it got pretty cold. I know that I'm going to have a little bit of the red of the cheek, the line of the shadow. And why don't I just go ahead and this photograph's better than most photos that I have to work with, even though I'm handpicking the photos. Um, you usually don't have a clear line between the light and the shadow side of the face. So that is a little bit of a help here. I also want to make sure you see how I painted the eye. Um, we're really looking up at her eye. So this lower lid has to have that curvature to it that tells us what direction we're not straight onto her face. We're looking at her face from below, and so have to remember to put a little bit of that in. And I'm going to go ahead and put in the white of the eye and maybe a little bit of the iris so I can get a better idea of the direction of the eye. Uh, well, the white of the eye is nice and blue, but I don't have it light enough. Okay, and Kiara Ciara is from Florida. I think you were here last week too. So I'm happy to have my repeat offenders come back. Um, Repeat watchers, I mean, you know what I mean. And I thought that the demo last week, I was really happy with it. I was done by the end of the session, and that seemed to do really well when I posted it too. So, and I kept that one really loose. This one, because it's commission, I am probably going to go a little bit tighter, make sure that I get the likeness. That doesn't mean that it won't necessarily have a lot of um, clear brushwork in it. So you see how the eyebrow here is crossing into the shadow, so have that part right. And then want to get sort of imaginary draw um, where the other eye starts. Even though I don't see the whole thing, I kind of have to think as if her nose were kind of transparent or invisible, that I can um, think about her eye starting right here, and then we're only seeing a little bit of it. Let me get a little black on the brush so I can, and then we can barely see inside her eye. I am going to later come back and put in little details so we have some information. And then if I think about the center line of her nose, the center line, it comes here, and then at her philtrum is tilted forward like this, so that's helping us understand that her lips are coming out forward. And I'm going to get some nice reds here to start with. That's a little bit brighter than her actual lip color, but it's easier to dull up the color than try to get it brighter later on. So that's not going to hurt me too much. And I'm just going to just do the full shape of her lips. But I do want to get a little bit of the center line here just so that I can have something that I can measure from. And again here, just this is my go-to paint when I'm doing like separation of the lips or inside a nostril, is my alizarin permanent. Just going to make sure that I'm getting her lips coming down a little bit, keeping the perspective right. So let's get a quick measurement here. The center line of her lips and the separation I get right there. And here, that's pretty much on. I do have the lower lip jutting out just a little bit too far, so I'm going to make a little bit of that flesh tone in that area by the face, by the mouth. And so I can come in. That's actually going to be mostly white at this point. I'm going to cut back a little bit. Okay, that looks good. And I'm going to do a little bit of that shadow color. Has a little bit of green in it. And when I say has a little bit of green in it, it can just be a very small step towards green. It can be mostly gray, but that's sort of the color that I'm reading in that gray. And just for kicks, I'm going to throw in some of the lighter pinks in the lips just to kind of get a sense of that, um, the wetness that's in her lips. I just want to get um, little clues that are going to help me later on see what it is that I'm doing. And I'm just going to throw in that lightest light that's really making her lips look glossy. And I'm going to probably adjust this later, but just want to get a little bit of a feel for it. Coming in a little bit thick right here just to get it. Okay. That's not feeling quite right yet, but it's a start. Probably need some of the colors around it that are going to help it read. And some of it is just adjusting the values too until they start to look right. Okay, so that's where her lips are going to be. Have another shadow that I didn't really indicate that's on the side of her nose. Have a lot of blue on the brush right now, but that's okay. It can be a little bit bluish. And sort of have to adjust that light that's alongside of her eye. I may have made her eye a little bit too far forward. So that'll give me some room. She has some eyeshadow that's on the very cool side, has a lot of blue in it. So that's affecting the flesh tones. And I think that the um, the light source on her is also fairly cool. If you can see how much red there is in the shadows, that gives us an idea of how what color the light is. So the light would be the opposite of that sort of orangey red color that we see in here, which would be kind of a bluish greenish kind of color. Now I think I have to really say where her iris is. Something like that. And better define the nostril. And the other nostril too, which I have up too high because it really has to be dropping down here. So let's put that all in. Okay, when I mix a little bit, again, I say flesh tones and I doesn't mean any specific color. I'm just talking about generally when I'm talking about the lid side of the face, the colors that I see, and a lot of people call that the half tone, which is where it's not getting the full brunt of the light, but you're seeing actually the most color because it's falling in a range where our eye can see the color most easily. Um, and a lot of people will say you put in your shadow, your average shadow color, and you put in your half tones first. I generally don't paint that way, but I kind of think that way. And then you can go in and put in all the other um, colors in the value structure. So all the colors in the shadows and in the light side will all be relative in color and value to each other. And as long as you maintain those relative colors and values, then the form will read correctly. Partially what I need here is a bigger brush because I'm with that brush I was using just to do the initial draw in. It's just too small and I'm not really laying in the paint the way I should. So I needed something that's a little bit more. Yeah, why not go for this big guy? This is I think a number 10. I never can read the numbers after I've started painting with it because I get a fair amount of paint on the handle of the brush. This is, I think, a number 10 um, flat, and pretty big in relationship to the face, but it's going to help me move things along here a lot more quickly. And I don't have to be perfect with the color, I just have to get kind of in the ballpark, and then I can adjust later. And here I have lots of, it's almost completely blown out in the photograph, but it's pretty close to white. And I can just leave that bare panel right now just to help me see the colors and the values. Got a little bit of dark grays here that I can put in um, that crease between her nostril and the cheek. And I may have to mix up a little more of that because I got too much white in it. But I really do want to start to get it leaning a little bit redder for the shadow side of her face, and start to think a little bit about the contour of her nose. She has some interesting features that define the shape of her nose there. Let me say that delicately. Um, so there's some, the tip of her nose has some small shapes around the tip, and then it drops in where you see the shadow, and the nostril is then coming out in towards the light a little bit. So it's catching just a little bit of light on that edge. So I do want to start to indicate those things just to get an idea. And there's quite a bit of orange in the transition between the light and the dark side. And got a little bit of shadow in her upper eyelid there, and I think that's from the hair coming across her face. So I'm just trying to be a little bit analytical as I'm painting these things in, so I just understand what's what's the light source, where it's coming from, if there's shadows, what's making the shadow. That if I follow the center line of her forehead's very short, foreshortened. So here is the bottom line of her forehead, and then the top line is then parallel with that, and then it comes down, and then this is where the hair is coming across right there. And then we see that's sort of the top corner. She's going to list some yellows in there along her temple. And now that's very exaggerated. So once I lighten up that enough, you're not going to really see the yellow in there. And then across her forehead's a little bit pinker. Again, I can exaggerate some of the color, but I know that has to go get tinted up quite a lot more. And then there's a little bit of a shadow here where her temple is, and across her top of her forehead. And then we have the hair coming in, and then we're in shadow here. So, and I have to think if that shadow is really as dark as I like it. I think I have to go darker. So remember I said that kind of dark, sort of a red. It's a little bit of red, a little bit of orange, but it's a bit of black will help shade it enough. Let me just look at your feed here. Jennifer saying, yes, I live in a freezer. Sorry to hear you have no heat. Um, well, I guess in my college years and a little bit after, I lived in lots of houses that didn't have adequate heat. And so the winters were very cold in where I lived. So this isn't so bad at the moment. It's supposed to get down in the 20s on, I forget which day, whether it's Thanksgiving Day. Um, so that's going to get very cold in this house. Hello from Florida. Kiara says, I'm a little bit jealous right now. Um, Randy says, don't get a shadow line as clear as that that often. Yes, we don't. So it just happens the photo is giving me a little bit of a of a break here. Let me see. Which colors do you generally use for skin tones? I'm using all of them. That's um, Medeers asked that because I'm using greens, I'm using blues, reds, and oranges. Lots of white. White is kind of the thing that helps tie at least the light side of the face together. A lot of tinting in those colors. So you can see there's probably going to be some yellows in here. There's some blues and greens in the face here. Lots of reds with white. There's again some blues, and that's part of the eyeshadow here that's helping it lean blue. There's going to be a little bit of purple maybe or magenta in this highlight. The tip of the nose is getting a bit of the naphtha red in it, and again some naphtha red or quinacridone red with white in this area. Here underneath the lip is going to be black and white and maybe a little bit of yellow, orange, and green thrown in there to get some of the colors there. And I already have that sort of painted. It's very gray. And I'm seeing some greens and purples in here. So I try to get those colors in the paint as I'm working, as I see the color, because I think a mistake a lot of people make is they make the flesh tones out of just two or three colors, or they pre-mix their colors and they use too much of the same color throughout the face when there's all these variation of colors that you can get. And then you can actually throw in some invented color. You're going to get a lot of color along the shadow line. Like here, you're getting a lot of reds and oranges here, whereas you move away from that shadow line and it's not quite as colorful. And then you're getting quite a bit of oranges and reds along here, a little bit of yellow and greens up here. And then here you do have some grays and greens here where the shadow's being casted from her hair. And then the hair is a whole other ball of wax of trying to match the colors in her hair. And then in her neck, I'm seeing lots of greens and reds. So it just gives you an idea. You can use your whole palette to get the flesh tones going on here. And I tend to. So let me get back to painting because I think that's what you guys are here for. Let me get enough of the shadow in so I can now start to see the forms in the face and then start to adjust the features so I can work towards a likeness. So I have the jaw coming up here, and again, got the drawing pretty close to where it needed to be off the bat. I'm going to look, and there were earrings covering it, I'm going to get the measurement of the bottom of her ear. Just going to imagine where it would be. That's going to be just a little bit lower. I know her earring is going to sit just right there, right about there. And then I go into an even darker shadow underneath it. Her chin. So I'm just kind of painting these in without really considering the whole form. Later I kind of have to step back or squint and look at the whole thing together to try to get it all to pull together. That really is lighter there, so try to get a little bit of that yellow green color going in there. So you can see how sloppily I paint, and that's partially intentional. I just really am trying to keep everything loose and but still work towards a certain sense of accuracy. Got the dark shapes in the ear here, got the hair coming across, and then the shadow underneath the ear. Okay. So it feels like some things are kind of off here. I have this distance essentially between the eye and the where the nostril starts here. So I have something a little bit off. Something, so let me do a little bit of measuring, see if I can figure it out. The base of the nostril is there. Maybe just a little bit higher. top of the nostril. This is not a very accurate way of measuring at the moment because this brush is a little bit too thick to get. So I am going to get a little bit of a thinner brush here so that I can get this. Okay, that looks good. So I think where I have her eye, the corner of her eye, I think I have it too high. That's going to be my guess. Yeah, that's part of the problem, at least anyway. Corner of her eye comes down to about there. I'm just going to pretend like her corner of her eye and her iris are all part of one shape, which they are. They're all sort of dark on dark, and then there's just a little bit of kind of light, shadowy pink color. If I can somehow match that color. It's just kind of swooping around here. And it doesn't have to be quite there yet. And then I want to get the feel of her. Now to be careful, I got this smaller brush in my hand again, and I want to hold on to that for dear life, but I need to really let it go if I'm going to do a good job here. Okay, eyebrow, going to adjust the angle and the color above it. Okay, and gonna push her lower eyelid up a little bit. There. And then I have this kind of greenish, yellowish, shadowy area here. Just kind of blocking it in a little bit, just see if I can get the forms to start to read a little bit. And don't forget my other eye. And other eyebrow. I just have it a little bit too high. Okay. So starting to see this a little. Let's adjust down here a little. So I'm being just a little bit timid until I can kind of get some of these landmarks right. And then I can, once I feel confident that things are where they need to be, then I can be lot more confident when I put the paint down. Just sort of feeling my way around a little bit still. And I said that I needed to get more white and tint into these areas, so that's what I'm doing. Put in a little bit color to begin with, and then I can come back over with white that will mix with the color to get the right values. Her top of her nose comes down, kind of slides in underneath that eyebrow shape. Okay. Have made her nose a little bit too large there, so I can trim that. Her hair is all pretty close to black, so I can come in with a dark and start to adjust those shapes. Well, not really dark enough, but and start to put in where her chin is. Okay. So if I start to get some of these larger shapes right, then you're going to start to feel where things are. At least that's what I'm hoping. Now, if you look at her gesture, you can see she has her head tilted back in relationship to her neck, so you can feel there's this extension in the neck. And I want to make sure that I'm getting that as I paint it. And her chin is forward, and I didn't really give her a chin, so let's see if I can adjust that a little. Yeah, well, I'm going to have to come a lot lighter there, but the paint is not very thick, so if I come in with a lot more white and pink, I can start to get that right color. And then, so I really have to have the line of her chin up, coming at an angle this way. Yeah, well, that's very gray. That's okay. And I said I was going to reserve some of that panel, the white of the panel, to see that white, but I've already put too much of some color down there. So I'm just going to adjust that. So as I'm working, I'm really looking at the relative shapes in her face and adjusting the shapes and positions subtly as I go, so that if I do it right, then the likeness will start to pull together a little bit more. And likenesses are a tricky thing because it requires so much a lot of finesse, I guess, is what you say, because it's lots of small shapes that have to be placed just right in relationship to each other to start to feel that likeness. At least a likeness in a convincing way where it doesn't feel overly labored, or that they're, I see a lot of times where like you can tell it is somebody, but there'll be enough problems with the anatomy that it'll be distracting. And so getting a certain amount of accuracy where all of the anatomy is right also is, it's really challenging. Okay, I need a clean paper towel. So I just, as I'm working, sometimes I'm washing the paint off the brush, but I'm generally drying it um, as I do that to get a kind of a clean brush. But sometimes I'll dip back into the, what I use Gamsol is my solvent, so that as I'm picking up more paint, they making the paints a little bit wet. Let me see if I haven't been paying attention to my feed. So I answered this question, I think, for Nadir's. Which color do you generally use for skin tones? Sherry Fox, Central Florida. Have been enjoying your videos. Thank you for sharing. Oh, you're welcome. And Madir says thanks for info. Okay, so I'm all caught up, and now back to the painting. Simplifying the shadow form a little bit here. So, but I'm losing her jawline, which is kind of a prominent feature here. It has a little bit of magenta in it. So I'm gonna see if I can get that. And then the underside of her chin is getting some oranges and reds reflected up into it right here, and getting that values just right so it does feel like light's coming in. Well, that's not the right value. That's way too light, because what I want to do is make sure that it's sufficiently darker than the light side of the face so that it reads a shadow. So slowly but surely, her, if not too eloquently, her the forms in her face are starting to appear enough. Let's see if I have her shoulder measurement right. This is going to be so high off the, so yeah, just about there. And I'm going to put in sort of a bluish gray background, which is the color behind her. I want to tie in both portraits together, so the background of the other portrait is going to have a similar colored background. That's not as blue as I'd like it, so a little bit too much red in there, so I'm going to add a little bit of phthalo green and phthalo blue to that, and a bit more white, and hopefully this will be the color. It's too colorful, but it's in the right direction. Yep. Okay, I think that's about where I want it to be. Try not to paint my monitor. And then I can start putting in black here. Start to get the shape of her head. So the shape of her hair is important because it tells me where her cranium is. It's just back here behind the ear. And then her hair sweeps out, almost touching the edge here. And it comes back. Okay, got a big brush. I can get a lot of paint on it and just start blacking in the hair. I've given her too much hair there, but I do have this background color ready to go. Okay. Okay, this is the exciting part of the painting where we just get everything moving along pretty quickly. See, her hair swoops down. This is the part that comes over the eye. And then it really gets much more of an auburn kind of color to it. Well, that's a little bit too much, but it's the right direction. Just get some of the highlights in here. So I know this light actually has to go much bluer where the highlights are, but then there's lots of oranges and reds and yellows in there. I did cut off the tip of her nose a little bit. Um, I think if people are thinking about plastic surgery, they should hire me to do a painting first of how they want their features to look, and then they can decide. I'm just kind of kidding there, but I know they do a lot of stuff with Photoshop to kind of give people the sense of what they would look like afterwards. I have to say I'm not a big fan of plastic surgery, at least not just for purely cosmetic reasons. I can understand someone getting plastic surgery if they've been in an accident or have some congenital birth defect or some reason that really truly negatively impacts their lives that due to no fault of their own. But people just have a preoccupation with wanting their nose to do a different thing than it does, or something like that. I know I'm getting myself into trouble here. I'm gonna get some nasty grams from some plastic surgeons probably after this, but oh well. Okay, well I have quite a bit of paint down, so getting that white on top there is going to be a bit of a challenge, but can just start getting a little bit thicker with the paint and covering over those areas. Okay, a little redder here. Okay, well I did say I lost the whole tip of her nose, so I'm going to have to put that back in. Probably using too big a brush for what I need right there, but that's okay. I can always come back in with a smaller brush. Okay, so I'm just going through, making little adjustments as I go. Okay, so let me see. Um, Madirs said, thanks for the info. Albert says, love your process. What kind of panel is this? I'll get that into that in a second. And Ripon says, so inspiring to see you paint live. I painted a portrait yesterday. One question, how come you paint so easily where I was confused when I was painting? Every was changing the entire face. Um, I don't know, every something was changing the entire face. Maybe you can rewrite it. So I don't necessarily understand the abbreviation. So my panels, I try to economize a little bit on the panels, maybe to my detriment, but I because I do so much painting and so much practice, I want to use a panel that holds up pretty well, is archival, but isn't a fortune. So with that regard, I use Speedball Mona Lisa panels, and I have to say that um, the surface of the panels not great. It's way too slick, and a lot of painters complain about it. But one coat of gesso, and it's exactly the way I like it. It takes all of 2 minutes to put a coat of gesso on it, and then just to let it dry. And as I go, I want to get a little bit of green here in the face. I'm really thinking about putting olive green back on my palette because of how often I am not easily mixing that color, but sort of what I want right there. So sort of towards an olive green, and up here a little bit. The hair line does come down a little bit lower here, and then comes across. Um, oh, so back to the panels. So Mona Lisa panels, Speedball Mona Lisa. Maybe in the when this is was posted to um, YouTube for on-demand watching, I'll put in the link for it. I tend to buy them um, from Dick Blick because they're extraordinarily inexpensive there for a 8 by 10 panel. If I can remember my prices, if you buy 10 panels at a time, it's a dollar 35 a panel, I think. and then it goes relatively up from there depending on the size. So a panel this size would cost about $2 and some change, and that's cheap enough so I can just paint without thinking about the cost of the panel. I kind of want the freedom to feel like I can mess up, that I haven't invested so much in the panel that I have every painting is then has to be perfect or precious, or I don't want to feel like the panels themselves are precious. And so that's why I think it's important for me not to spend so much on the panels. I know that I can buy similar panels from Ampersand or some other of the panel manufacturers, and the panels this size would be easily $10. And I just don't want to spend that much money on each panel. I do uh, close to 200, maybe not 200, 100 paintings a year. So if I was spending $10 a panel or more, if I was painting some larger sizes, then I would be spending $1,000 a year in just the panels. And I just don't think that's where I want to put the money when I can buy less expensive panels. Anyway, I hope that answers the question. Um, uh, oh, millimeter. Oh, mm's were millimeters. Okay. I take it you're probably not in the U.S. if you're saying millimeters. Um, Canada, maybe? I don't know. You can tell me. And um, so, yeah, my process is very loose, but I'm working towards something as I go. I'm not, and I used to have this problem. I've spent a lot of time over the last few years, kind of getting over some of the issues that were um, kind of um, making it difficult for me to paint. Sort of having trouble with the materials, having trouble with my working process, with my lighting, um, with sort of seeing, with understanding the values a little bit better, the colors a little bit better. And so as a consequence, I can kind of gradually work up to where I want to go, as long as I'm adjusting and continually adjusting in the right direction. Then eventually it gets to look like the way I want it to look. I can tell right now I have her ear off where it should be. So I'm going to get a measurement here. This is the front edge of her ear here, this measurement. And you can see there, this is the front edge. So I have something. Oh, I lost that line so quickly. Thought I scratched it in pretty well. So right here, and then that little, the white shape I have there to indicate her earring is sort of not in the right place either. And then her hair is coming down here. Okay. So that's really where her ear is. This is where the shadow is underneath. It's a little more this way. And okay. The corner of her jaw is there. You seeing the underneath of the chin. And then this goes into light. Okay, so starting to see the form appear because I have these progressive changes of value and color that are starting to help me read the contour of the face. And I can adjust those shapes as I go. I don't know if any of you have experience working in Photoshop, but there's a feature called posterize. It's one of the adjustment filters, and I like playing around with it because what it does is it takes like a photograph of someone's face, and um, it simplifies it into large discrete shapes of value and color. and it's almost how I want to paint in a way. I want to paint in large areas of value and color change and in the shape that they are in the forms of the face, because if I do that correctly, then you really do with just a few brush strokes, you're really getting a whole sense of the anatomy. Do want to get a sense of the shadow coming down on her face, has a little bit of green, a little bit of black in it, and then we get just a little bit of a dark yellowy color on the far side of that. It's not enough white in it. Something like that. Sort of a break in that shadow. I'm going to have to spend some time adjusting the shape of the tip of her nose. It's off in a couple different directions. But if I don't get that right, it's not going to look, none of it's going to look right. Kind of get that nostril in there. Again, a really big brush for doing little detail work, so unless I change to a smaller brush, I'm going to have difficulty really refining some of those shapes. I'm just pushing some of the paint that's on there around a little bit. I don't want to do it too much because then you can kind of get an overly blended sort of look. But unifying some of the areas and values that are too jumbled or broken up can distract from seeing the form. I have some light just there in the philtrum. Really, this is much too large a brush for what I'm trying to do there. It's okay. If I happen to just get it right, and it looks like I did it all in some very large brush strokes, that's not such a bad thing. Okay, so far everyone, the picture's good, the sound is good. I'm not having anything drop out from my cheap old router. That's probably where I should have spent more money, is getting a better router. Because I've had my broadcast go out. I never know if it's me or YouTube, but just assume that it's me most of the time because we have so much problem with this router. But maybe the cold of the house is keeping it running. Let me see if I can get a measurement to the bottom of her chin. Let me pull this up to the right height. Got this big old long brush. Yep. Yep, so I have that about right. Just gonna go a little bit stronger with the red in here. Picking up that color on her cheek. Getting a little bit whiter. And you see how I'm painting the forms sort of painting the shapes along the forms of the face. And the paint strokes, sorry, I can't even talk. Paint strokes are moving in the same direction to help emphasize the direction of the contour of the face. That's something that you see a lot in John Singer Sargent's work, where he actually comes out very thick with the paint so that you can see the bristle brush hairs carving grooves, almost like a record, the grooves in a record, in the contour of the face. So you look at most John Singer Sargent paintings, you get up close, you can see he's really going with thick paint and carving the face with thicker strokes in the direction of the form. I think that was one of his favorite techniques. It also is helpful because then if light is reflecting off the paint, that all of the brushstrokes are in the same direction and it still reads okay. You don't have the distracting glare of the light interfering with the look of the painting. Although I have to say, I think all artists must struggle with glare at certain times. There's just no way to avoid it. The paint is not flat like a photograph, so there always going to be some light interfering with the colors and the values in the painting itself. So I'm still being really tentative and painting fairly thinly. At some point, I am going to come in with much thicker paint, but I'm not quite there yet. Okay, that really went too red there, but okay. Jennifer says crashing early tonight. Thanks. Have a good one. Okay, well, come back and watch when I post it to my channel. I mean, it automatically posts after I'm done, so you're welcome to watch more of it if you want. But have a good night and have a great holiday weekend. Okay, let's see. Feeling like her jaw is just a little bit too low at that spot. Let's get a measurement. If I'm not quite sure, I can always measure. Yep, that's about where it'll be. That's the light there. There's a little bit of yellow reflected up there. And that goes into a bit of a pink. Okay. And then we have, I'm missing the light that's hitting right here. Okay. Making some progress here. Not too bad for the first hour. I'm gonna block in the strap of her blouse. Let me pull the corner out just to make sure getting everything. Okay. Okay, so I've got, sorry, um, I got the shadow here from her, I forget what this muscle is called, but basically this is the tendon up in from the collarbone up that comes up behind the ear here. And I may want to soften that up quite a bit. I have that a little bit too accentuated. Here's where I have a little bit of greens and light colors, even though that looks a little bit too dark. Okay, so I gotta get a little more white in here. Okay, so going through. So right now the way I'm painting, none of these are really my finished strokes. Sometimes when I paint, however, I'll be doing some of my finished strokes right from the beginning and just not have that level of concentration tonight that I can do that. It really takes a fair amount of patience just stopping and trying to get each stroke just perfect as you go. Okay, just kind of working around the form, trying to get in the larger shapes. Okay, and sort of a lightish pink here for her collarbone area. That goes into highlight right there. Okay. So here, everything I've done so far, it's pretty much just very fairly light wash. And here's where I have to start getting a little more committal with the paint, coming in with some thicker paint and putting a lot more paint on the brush to begin with. So first what I can do is just clear off some of my palette so I can come in with some fairly pure color where I want to. I want to, again, come in, I want to fill in the rest of the background now. So that's a little bit of phthalo blue, a lot of white, and maybe a hint of some other colors just to get it a little bit gray. The more colors I bring into the mixture, the grayer it will get. That's fine. Okay, it's tempting just to put more and more solvent on the brush just to get it to cover larger areas, but what I really want to do is get some thicker paint down. So I have to avoid that temptation of getting too washy with the color. Yep, I wanted to dip in there again, but I'm holding off and just trying to get more paint on the brush. Because that's what's going to, in the end, I think, make this painting work, is getting some thicker paint down. Yep. Let's see if I can move that shape of the hair around a little bit. Okay. So that was a lot of white and blue. Let's see if I can keep on going with that. Okay, a little bit too much red in there. Wow, really using up that white. So let me grab some more. Okay, got a few of you still with me. I haven't bored you to death yet. That's good. Either that or you're falling asleep in front of your computer. And but either way, I'm grateful for the watch time. If you're awake or asleep, I don't think YouTube can't tell. Okay. I just say that because the more watch time, the more YouTube promotes it to suggest it to other people. Either as a painting video or a video for insomnia. This might be a good video to watch for that. I should start putting that into my tags that it's a insomnia cure. Watching watching paint dry or something like that. And I have a white coming all the way down to that corner. When I say white, I mean the background. Okay. Okay. So let's start refining. I think I need to get a little bit smaller brush if I'm going to do this without wiping out everything that I've already painted. So this is a good sized brush for chiseling. It's about a half an inch wide, maybe a little bit less than that. And but it's I wonder if this is the one. I took a brush that was I had used it so much it was starting to get a little bit bushy, and so I came in with an X-Acto knife and I trimmed away a lot of the brush hair, so it kind of started to come back to a more of a chisel point, and now it's starting to fan out a little bit more. But it was really good to work with a brush that I had reshaped. So here's where I start to want to get the values, colors, and placement right of every stroke. And if I start to do that, then the painting will should come together rather quickly. At least you'll start to see the forms appear a little bit better. And I do want to get some of the photographic effects that I see in the painting, and the only way I can get that is by matching some of the values and colors, and also using that sort of alla prima effect of wet into wet, which allows there to be really nice combination of hard and soft edges, which sort of what photographs tend to do naturally. See if I can get that little bit of reddish color in the forehead, kind of reddish pink. Got some dried paint stuff. See if I can get that off before I get too far. Okay, still want to remember my foreshortening, which means that this corner of the forehead has to go up much higher. There, that's better. Then I'm going to come in a little bit darker here. Okay, I'm really starting to get thicker here, which is good. Sort of getting the making me less timid. And this brush has a nice chisely sense to it, so I can start to build up values and try to carve kind of more of the sense of form. Okay, I'm really sort of feeling that curve right here in the that top part of the nose, that little keystone triangle area. So you see how thick I'm coming in here, and I'm being much more committal, and that's partially because I've gotten enough of the landmark and placement of where things are that I feel confident enough in brush strokes. I can come back later and adjust, but hopefully I won't need to too much. Really got to go almost white there. Here's where I need a little bit of yellow with white just to shift that color a little bit. Okay. Okay. Let me know you guys are still there, paying attention. Not that you have to pay attention, but if there is someone out there paying attention, I like to know. And especially if you have questions, because that's what's going to keep me going here in this chilly house. Is something if there's something you guys want to know, I'm more than happy to um, talk about it. Okay, look at the corner of the nose compared to the eye. I think you meant to say eye. So corner of the nose, I don't know if you mean here. Yeah, it's. I know the little bit of the angle of the photo in the camera does throw stuff off too. So just as long as I have the right angle when I'm comparing, those should come out okay. I literally can look back and forth between the two, and that can give me a fairly accurate read if I have it set up correctly. I am going to throw just a little bit of the highlight in her eye just to kind of give me a little bit better sense what's going on. Okay. So even though I like a lot of brush work in to be apparent in the face, sometimes to get the white of the eyes to read correctly, you have to get them fairly smooth with maybe a little indication of the brush stroke around the edges. Let's try to get the lighter, bluer area of the eye here. Need to come in with some pure white. There's quite a bit of orange in her iris right here. Gotta go darker. So yeah, so this some of these areas I got a little bit too much white in the mixture, and that's kind of clouding things up a little bit. Okay. So I'm using an old brush that's sort of come to a point here, and I'm using it to do some detail. But now I have to go back to my bigger brush because it's starting to hurt me a little. starting to read that eyeball a little bit. There's some little distracting um, brush marks, inadvertent brush marks that are kind of getting in the way of the read a little bit. Okay, now I'm starting to see that a little bit better. And then don't really want to paint them yet. I just want to get a little indication of how I'm going to paint those eyelashes. Okay. And her eye, I don't know what you call that, mascara. Okay, now I can start to refine a little bit. Get those subtle colors underneath their eye, which I painted it totally the wrong color, but that's okay. So it's sort of an orangey, grayish color, grayish green. And then we have the upper part of the cheek and a little bit of a transitional form right underneath it. And then we have a little bit of rouge on her cheeks and some of her natural reddish skin tones here. This is where I said I'm going to come in thicker. Haven't really done that yet. And sort of get a nice big mixtures of the colors that I want to get some paint down on this. And if I have enough paint, then I can start really pushing the paint around, pushing one color of paint up against another color. Got a little bit of an orange, I mentioned this before, orange transitional color right in here. Okay, keep on working on some of these refined values that I see. That gets much whiter. The transition here is more subtle. And then this shadow has to have a little bit of a soft edge so we understand that it's a cast shadow, but the object casting the shadow is far enough away so that shadow starts to soften a little bit. Yeah, Neil Soul says corner of the eye. Yes, I understood that. That's what you were trying to say. Not seeing that that's terribly off yet, but I'm going to go back and look at it later. The beauty of painting this way is it's very malleable. You can put something down and sort of push it one way or another and mix the colors around it into it. Okay, I want a measurement from top of the panel to the opening of her ear, at least the bottom where it starts. There. So that should be higher. Yep. That should be higher. So something like that. And so then that white diamond earring is about there. So let's see if I can pull together the shadows in the shadow side of her face. And I have to, again, clear out an area on the palette because there's just too much white and colors that are going to contaminate my shadow if I'm not careful. There can be a little bit of some colors in there, but not too much. So I'm getting getting black and some red. And I can maybe have a touch of white in there just to bring out the color a little bit more. It's a little bit better, closer to the value that I need. And let's get enough color down so that so it ties everything together. So you can still see it. I have a little bit too much white in the paint. Okay. Adjust the shadow line a little bit. Have it come out just a little bit further before going down. Okay. And again, if I come in thicker paint, I really do have to mix the color. I can't just start pushing colors around. I have to come down with the actual color to begin with. Okay, looking at just comparing some of the colors here. There's this multicolor shape here, this top part of the cheek. That's just sort of the transition off the side of the nose. You got some white, purplish white reflecting back out here. It's actually not too bad, just lost a little bit of the width. Got a little bit of orange in there. Maybe that's red. It's better. So I used to think, I had sort of magical thinking in my early painting days, that if I just took big swings at things, just be very um, aggressive with the brush, I guess you would say, that somehow the little detailed stuff would just all work itself out. And that's where I kind of ran into a lot of trouble, is because I would just be pushing a lot of paint around, but I wouldn't be getting to what was actually there. It was with much experience that I came up with the phrase, if you want it to be in your painting, you have to paint it there. Meaning that you have to intentionally put something in the way you see it or the way you want it if you want it to be in your painting. You can accidentally get some things, but most of the time you have to be quite intentional, or that stuff just isn't going to come out. It just doesn't. And I've learned that the hard way. It's not, you can't just start swinging away at something and hope that it's going to come out, because it doesn't, at least in my experience. But I have not been able to have little subtleties of things, small details end up in the finished painting if I don't actually paint those things intentionally. I mean, you always can get happy little accidents that happen and then decide to try to preserve those or recognize them as being an interesting part of the painting. Okay. Okay, so I have these very hard sort of transitions between one value and the next, and I will work on softening those so that they start to read correctly. Okay, have that shape come down. Okay, I'm going to keep on going. Okay, so please tell me this is ripping. Please tell me what's better to paint, eyelashes and black hair, question mark. I used black paint plus gray ND, felt it was working well, and no doubt felt it was working well. Somebody told me that burnt sienna and ultramarine blue mixture works better. Okay, so this is um, this is the great impressionist debate about how do you use black or no black or mixtures of black, and when and where do you use it. And this has become very confusing for a lot of beginning artists because someone will say, "Oh, you never use black in a painting. It's, you'll ruin your painting. It's against the rules or something like that." Well, the truth of the matter is there is no rules. Whatever works for you works. And but there's lots of people that get very dogmatic about, what colors you're supposed to have in a painting or not. And I think that gets kind of silly to try to be authoritarian about what other people use in their paintings based on your philosophy of art. And I know a few painters out there like that. It's like they devalue people who would use black in their painting, for example. And black is a perfectly legitimate color to use in your painting, and it is especially useful for doing certain things, like an area that you want to be jet black. The best way to get there is cracking open a tube of ivory black or Mars black or some other black and painting in those areas black. If that's what you're trying to get in your painting, then it's pretty hard to get there without black. That said, there's ways of mixing black with complementary colors. One is burnt sienna with ultramarine blue, as you mentioned. Another is the black that I'm currently using is a called chromatic black, and it's a mixture of highly transparent complementary colors. Sorry, a little bit of a yawn. Complementary colors, phthalo emerald and quinacridone red are both very strong colors and highly transparent, but when you mix them together, because they're perfect complements, they neutralize each other perfectly and make a nice rich black. Um, so that's one way of getting black without having black, in a sense, because you're making black out of colors that you might naturally already have in your palette. So actually, I do have those two colors: the quinacridone red and the phthalo emerald. I have them both in my palette, and can mix that phthalo black if I wanted to, but I don't want to spend all my time mixing blacks. I just want a black. So okay, so I need to start to. When I said you have to be intentional about things, this is where I need to start to get very intentional. So I have this shape of her cheek. I have a little bit of the reddish color there. That should be that color. And I have that goes to white right there. It's going to be hard to get back to that bright white that she has, but I can just start to get a little bit thicker. Okay, but I have this form in the cheek, and I can see that it has very little white in it. I have to clean this up here. But then this form, there's where the shadow is right here. And it's useful to think about it because putting it down, even though I can't see it, helps the viewer understand what the form is doing right there. Then I have back to a kind of a lighter grayish green right here. And okay, that's measures right. Um, so if you want to paint hair and eyebrows and make them black, using black is fine. Um, I think it's fine. You're if you're going for an impressionistic effect, you want to have colors in both the you want to have a fair amount of color in both the shadow area of the forms and in the light area of the forms. And you can use black to get there. It's just you would be using more of a tint tone shade color mixing system more than a complementary color mixing system. But you can still get the same colors essentially. If you have a limited palette, you may not be able to get some colors, but considering that Anders Zorn, one of the great 19th century realist painters, would get all kinds of rich and interesting colors, but just having a few colors on his palette. But he was a master at sort of developing and mixing those colors. Okay, a lot of this in my mind looks still kind of streaky and looks, still kind of looks like paint. Really have to get some of those shadows a little bit thicker and be a little more accurate about the light that's bouncing around in her face here. Okay, just the hairline here is where place where it's important to adjust. And the ear in the shadow is really much darker. A lot of white in there, and it's not close to white. That's a little bit better. Okay, let's see if I can fix the forms in her nose a little bit. It's looking a little bit unformed still. It's got a little bit of a light color on the outer bone of her nose there. Let's see if I can get the tip of her nose just out a little bit further. Hello, I'm back. I don't know if you can hear me. Um, Come on, you can do it. Hello? Yeah, I'm back. I don't have my speaker plugged in anymore because I guess my adapter, I couldn't tell it wasn't charging. So at least I can see now that it is got a charge going. So I see Randy is still here. Um, Maybe one other person and myself, so that's fine. I may, if you want me to keep on painting, I will. Now that I have this back up. Move hand. Oh, I'm have my hand in front. Let me see. It always takes a few seconds. Uh, hmm I think the screen might be frozen though. I'm not seeing. Up there. Yes, there's about a 30-second delay there. Hello. Okay. So I am gonna keep painting. I guess Randy's here. I don't know. Maybe Angela is still there. Um, Let me see if I can get the microphone plugged in here too and get this going again. The full setup, and so that people can hear me easily. I may have to check to see if it's charging. Let me see. Am I charged? Sorry, I'm back. Yes, it's charging now. Don't know why it stopped charging before, but um, there's always some technical difficulty with all this, and I apologize. I think it just adds a little bit of interest to the whole show. You never know when it's going to go out on you. Okay, so what I'm seeing so far is I have a lot of the general shapes in here, but I really don't have um, a good level of refinement um, to any of it for it to be reading properly. So this is where I really gotta slow slow everything down quite a bit and sort of find the tops, the bottoms, and the sides of the different shapes in here and start describing them a little bit better and getting a little more accurate to the photo. Have areas of color that kind of go from light to dark and areas where you see real specific colors in her face and really start to hone in and get some of that working right so that I can get little pieces of it that are look like they're facing in the right direction to give you give the viewer enough information to understand what's going on in the face here. This is where there's this little area of orange in the front facing part of her cheek there before the form starts turning and catches a lot of light. And this is what I'm talking about is getting some of that detail in that's going to help tell you what the form is doing. Okay, so that is trying to get that color in right there. It's a little bit of a challenge. So I'm coming in with a little bit thicker paint. Trying to move the paint strokes in the direction that will help the form read a little bit. Okay, I think I'm starting to get that, and that just comes up just a little bit higher here. Then I have sort of this greenish gray that comes in under her lower eyelid. Bit of a highlight here. And then I have that coolish kind of bluish white that's right on the far side of her eye. And then I don't even have this color in yet. There's a little bit of orange and green that's on her upper lid. Randy, can you let me know if the picture looks kind of out of focus or um, low resolution to you? Because when I look at it on my screen, it looks like I'm getting a low resolution image. Oh, you have good res? Okay. Don't know why I'm getting I don't really care if I have low res, but I don't want other people to get that. Okay, so it's taking me a little while to mix that color, which is fine, as long as I eventually get there. And then I want to be a little bit more exacting with the color of this the value here. Okay, got this chiselly brush, which is fine, which means overall I have a little bit of a choppiness to the forms in the face, but um, it's a good shape of brush that you can really get in and get a lot of thinner and thicker shapes rather easily depending on what angle you turn it. Need to get a little more of the dark here. Really, I'm in shadow there and I didn't really, it's way too light. Almost have some pure, I wouldn't say pure black there, but gets much darker. This is where I really have to squint down to see how things are reading. Okay. And then I'm getting a little bit of a streak of white or light right along the shadow edge here, and I don't want that in there. Although it does look like in the photo there is something like that. It's just catching a little, some of the hairs in her face that are catching the light a little bit, but I don't think I want that in the painting per se, because I'm not painting those really tiny details in the face, or at least I don't want to. Okay, just came in a lot darker there, which is fine because overall that shadow has to go darker. Okay, let me see if I can get the values right in the ear here, because that's been eluding me so far. Dark. Well, I've moved that diamond earring quite a few times already. Just got a little bit of the highlight in the hair here, just so I can start to have it start to read. And I think I can do the same on this side, just for a little bit of balance. And I want to be a little bit more exacting of this shape, the shadow part of the nose. This part is really important to the likeness, and I've been a little bit clumsy about it so far. Okay, hopefully my phone is charging now because I can't. Okay, well, I'm just going to paint here. Don't really have an audience anymore. This phone has been giving me way too much problem. It's more the charging cable that doesn't seem to be working properly, but I'm just moving along with this painting. I think I lost Randy was my last cohort, and which is fine. I am just going to paint here quietly. For those of you who are going to watch it later, that's fine. Just like to have a bit of a record here that will be part of this as I go. And just comparing, painting, adjusting to get some of these shapes and forms working. have to type the answer. Is it different between oil painting and acrylic painting? They can look very similar when they're finished, but the experience of painting them is much different. You can't really blend acrylic painting that easily, so it's more like painting a solid shape over or next to another solid shape until you finish the painting. Whereas with oil paints, you can blend them as you paint. night. Anyone who is still watching, I am signing off. I did as much as I can tonight, and I'll probably finish the rest offline. Sorry about all the technical difficulties, and not sort of the usual live painting demo because because my phone discharged and turned off twice during the demo. But again, thank you, and hopefully things will go a lot smoother next week. Have a good night.